All right, welcome to School Facilities and Operations. I'm your host, Burke Jones. And every week on this show, we have two different types of interviews. One is with vendors like roofers, flooring people, all of those kind of trades that we want to learn from. And we really pick their brain about the knowledge that they can give us. And then the other type is we talk with someone that's in the trenches with a K-12 district in some role, whether it's director of facilities, or as today's guest is the executive director of construction. So today we have Tommy Osborne. He is the executive director of construction with Northwest Independent School District, which I believe is a suburb or in the area of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Correct.
Um, Very fast-growing district, and so I thought it'd be fun to have him on and just hear what a very large district functions like that is growing like crazy. So Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Burke. I appreciate it.
So give us a little background on how you ended up being the executive director of construction, kind of what your work life has been, and then tell us something about yourself we can't read about on LinkedIn.
Interesting. Okay. Architect by training, graduated from Kansas State University with a Bachelor of Architecture in '92, and really kind of took the normal path. Got a job at an architecture firm, and then just kind of saw where that career was going to take me. I didn't really have any specific idea of what market sector that I really wanted to focus on. So I worked with a multitude of different size firms. I've worked with some of the largest firms in the world, with Perkins and Will, down to a very small 5-person firm when I first moved down to Texas in early 2000. So it's given me a really great opportunity to see the pros and cons of different size firms and a bunch of different market sectors. One of the ones that I really fell in love with was K-12, with a lot of family being educators, my wife being an educator. I was really drawn to that market because it's a fairly quick turnaround, not only in design, but in construction. So as opposed to working on a massive hospital or large skyscraper where you're on those projects for 5-7 years, most of our projects are pretty quick. So design to construction is usually 2 years or less on a elementary school, obviously a little bigger for a high school, but I really enjoyed that opportunity to not only see that design get implemented and built, but also get that instant feedback from the end users and what we could do better in the design. So that's always really been fun. So just kind of continued on the normal career path in architecture. And like I said, I moved down to Texas in early 2000s. And through some of the economic downturns and upturns, it led me to working for Perkins and Will. I was their senior project manager in their K-12 studio in their Dallas office. So a great opportunity to work with one of the largest firms in the world. But then I had an opportunity through some volunteer work with the Metropolitan YMCA here in Dallas to come over to the owner side. So their vice president of properties and facilities was retiring. He was an architect. He and I had met each other at various events over the past few years as I was volunteering for one of the local branches here in the DFW area. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to retire. You seem to be a great fit. You should consider coming over to the owner side." And I was really kind of torn because I didn't know really what an architect would do working for a nonprofit, not really understanding at that time the tools that you have as an architect and how that can really benefit an owner side, not only with just good design, but also maintenance and things like that. So threw my hat in that ring and got the job and absolutely loved it. It was really where that fire, that passion that I have for watching the designs become reality in construction was rekindled. And that's when I was just like, man, construction is really what I love about this industry and architecture. And the thing I learned mostly about being on the owner side was what good and bad design can do for an owner, right? You can have this beautiful, beautiful building, but if it is an absolute nightmare to maintain because Now you've got to have a lift that can go up 2.5, 3 stories sometimes just to keep the cobwebs out of the upper areas, or changing light bulbs, or maintaining some diffusers, or, some things like that, ductwork, dampers, all that stuff that you've got to own and maintain. That's when I really started seeing the impacts of what we designed and how that can be really detrimental to the owner in the long term. And so having that knowledge, and then having an opportunity to come into the position that I have now, working for a school district, was a neat opportunity where I really, all that history and all that knowledge that I've been able to gain, I could really put it to use in what I love. Not only that is K-12, but also in construction, and having that knowledge and that background, being able to implement that and guide our design teams and our facilities folks to making good choices up front in the design, so that it's not really hurting us, for the next 40, 50 plus years that we're going to own these buildings and try to maintain them the best we can.
Right. Absolutely. So I think we've taken kind of similar paths along the road, but tell me something about yourself that is just not business related.
Not business related.
Like
Well,
something I could do or
I think those that know me know I'm just an absolute huge Kansas State fan. Love all things purple. I love college sports. I will spend an entire Saturday watching college football, whether it's my team or any other team. I love telling the story when my wife and I were dating. We started dating in February, so by the time college football season rolled around, we'd been together a few months. And opening weekend of college football, she's like, "Well, what are you doing this weekend?" I said, "Well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm watching college football." And she said, "Well, what game?" I said, "I don't know what you mean by game. That sounded singular. I'm going to watch all the games." And so huge college sports fan, played rugby at Kansas State. So that's something unique that a lot of people always find surprising, that here's this little kid from Midwest Kansas playing rugby. And we actually had a really good team at Kansas State. So that was a fun experience as well.
So just full disclosure, Tommy and I go way back. So we graduated from K-State at the same time with architecture degrees, and we worked together for a couple years. So I just got to share one story. So we took our architectural exam, which was like a week long exam, and I think it was like Monday through Thursday or something like that. And the last day was the design exam, so it was, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours. It was as long as you needed to get it done. So we all finished at different times and headed back. And we get back to work, and Tommy's like, "My car caught on fire on the way home." I don't know, you had some car, it was
Yeah,
yellow and
yeah, yeah.
had a bee on it or something. And it driving down I-35, it just caught on fire and was totally engulfed, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that's like the last thing you want to have happen after working on that exam for a week. But yeah, I was coming home just mentally fried after that experience. Was outside of Emporia, and all I could think of was like, man, in like an hour and a half, I'm in bed and asleep. And then all the dash lights came on, the car lost power, smoke started rolling out from underneath the hood, pulled over, popped the hood, and fire. Just the gas line blew a leak, started shooting gas on the engine, and it just got engulfed. And so here I am, literally in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, and my car has just got flames rolling out from underneath it. I have all my drafting equipment in the back of the car, a week's worth of clothes. And I'm just standing there doing this debate going, well, if my car blows up, what is it that I absolutely have to have out of this car? So I'm grabbing whatever I can grab and running away from the car going, okay, if it blows up, this looks like a safe distance, running back, grabbing more stuff. And this very nice trucker and his wife pulled over, had an extinguisher and put it out, and then took me to the next truck stop where I called some family members to come pick me up. But yeah, that was a nice kick in the butt after a week long of being kicked in the butt through that architecture exam.
Yeah, and back in those days, we had no money.
No money, no cell phone. I was like, I don't know what I am literally out here in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, good times.
Yeah. Yeah, I still remember that story like it was.
I'll never forget it. I will never
Yeah.
forget
Yeah. Well, then we all felt bad that we were ahead of you and
that.
didn't go past you. So you guys, what are you the fastest growing school district in the nation, or it's
Well,
got to be?
not in the nation, in North Texas for sure. So, Northwest ISD is, just north of Fort Worth. We're due north of Fort Worth, about 26 miles to the center of our district. So we are a very large district geographically. We're 234 square miles. So we touch 3 counties. We touch Tarrant County, which is what Fort Worth is, Denton County, and a little bit of Wise County. You can see the map over my shoulder here. That kind of shows a big part of our district. Within those 3 counties, we touch 14 little tiny communities. So we are in the unique position of not only having to have a bunch of different counties that we've got to work with, we also have a bunch of small communities. And some of these communities are, I kid you not, small, less than 1,000 people. Some of them are 4,000 and 5,000 plus, so some pretty decent sized towns. But even within a town that size, they may not have a staff that can review plans and things like that. So they will outsource a lot. So we also have to deal with a lot of third-party plan reviewers. So it's a bit of a challenge. But in the North Texas area, we are the fastest growing school district by leaps and bounds. And our demographer tells us that we will probably stay in that position for the next 20 years, just due to our size, because right now we have about 120 some active home development sites in our district, which can range from anywhere from 500 to 800 homes up to some mega developments that are over 10,000 homes. So some of these little communities that are 3,000, 4,000 people have developments that are more than double the size of their current population. So there is going to be a lot of change over this area over the next couple decades that is going to be exciting to be a part of, but it's also going to be a challenge because right now we're having to build about an elementary school a year just to keep up with the growth. So when we went into the pandemic right before spring break of 2020, we were on an average of about 800 to 1,100 new students a year, which was pretty manageable. But again, that's still an elementary school a year because our elementary schools are 850 kids. So
Oh, wow.
we have, so because of the size and the multiple communities, the decision was made a long time ago that we were going to try to build bigger schools so that we built fewer of them. And so our elementary schools are 850, our middle schools are around 1,200, and then our high schools are all going to be 3,200 student population. So coming out of the pandemic, we really anticipated that growth to maybe slow down a little bit. So maybe stay right around below 1,000 students a year. But much to our surprise, and even our demographer's surprise, we came out more than double that. So now we're growing at 2,000 to 2,200 students a year. And that's been pretty consistent over the last 2 years. So
Wow.
we had a bond that we were scheduled to go out in May of 20, and obviously with the pandemic hitting, the state shut down all elections. So that wasn't an option for us. We really wanted to try to do something over the summer, but the governor absolutely said no. So that put us in the worst case scenario of trying to have a bond election during the most contentious presidential election in history. And so that didn't pass, not surprising. So we went back out again in May of 21, greatly reduced the price of the bond. I think our initial bond was right around 980 million that we tried to pass in May of 2020 or November of 2020. So we reduced that by more than a quarter of $250 million. So we were just north of 700 million. And in Texas, the state a few years ago forced all public schools to break apart their bonds so that you could not have one bond that had schools, stadiums, sports facilities, buses, technology, all that stuff had to be broken up. So,
Oh, wow.
so now typically we will have 4 propositions on any bond, and that'll be growth, which is all the new construction, anything to deal with athletics. So when we wanted to re-roof our existing stadium roof, that had to be a separate proposition. It couldn't just be in maintenance, which is here nor there, right? That's
Right.
politics. Any of the technology is a separate category, and then buses, transportation, maintenance, those kind of things is another one. And so out of I think it was like $736 million proposition, all but some of the athletic facilities passed, of which of that I'm overseeing right now about 725 million in new construction. So we are on the last phase of that, and then looking to go back out for another bond probably in May. Right now we have our long range planning committee that's putting together the list that will make the recommendation to the board in January. And then the board has until mid-February to call a bond election for May. So we'll see how all that goes over the next few months.
With such a distributed district, do you try to appease everybody a little bit, or or how does that work?
So that's a great question. And several years ago, that's the way we did it, because we are so spread out. There would be pockets that, well, if we're not getting anything, then we're not going to vote for this, right? So if only it's going to be on this side of the district, then these guys, we're not voting for that. So that used to be how it was done, and it could be done that way because we had enough work going on or need throughout the entire district. Well, now we're growing at such a rate where we have certain pockets that really have the growth, right? So right now it's on the southern end, which is closest to downtown Fort Worth. So normally from a metropolitan area, you'll just see how it, kind of grows out in those circles. Well, that southern end of our district is where the majority of the growth is. So the one middle school that's down there is more than at capacity. The high school will be more than at capacity next fall. And so that's really where we're going to have to target some of that. So we're at a point now, because of our long range planning committee is all volunteers. They're all members of the community that have stepped up and volunteered to be on this community. They are the ones that are making the recommendation to the board. And so we feel like it's much more of a community input recommendation rather than the district leadership going, here's what we think we need. And so by doing it that way, we feel like we have better community support, because we also empower those folks. Look, we as a district can't tell folks to go out and vote yes. We can say go out and vote, but we can't tell you how to vote. And so it's really up to our long range planning committee to help us get that message out there of what's needed, why it's needed, and where it's needed.
So tell me a little bit about your department, because I know I managed probably, I don't know, 50, 60 million over a couple of year period, and did my regular day job, but it was it was a lot of hours and a lot of stress.
Right.
So how's your department set up? Because I mean, even just for you, that's too much work probably to stay on top of. So
Right.
yeah.
So I think the way we're set up really makes it very manageable. So under the facilities planning and construction department, we are broken down by so our assistant superintendent of facilities, my boss, Tim McClure, who is the other architect, he oversees construction, planning, maintenance, and outsource operations. And outsource operations is really the big one that it gets real muddy, because there's just so much in there. So that's food service, that's custodial, that's after school programs, and that's transportation. And so we have an executive director that oversees all of that. We've got an executive director of facilities that oversees all the maintenance. So all the just the day-to-day hardware, door hardware issues, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry, low voltage. He's overseeing all that irrigation, all that stuff. Our executive director of planning, Sarah Stewart, she is the one that's working with the architects up front, early design stuff. And she works a lot with Tim trying to figure out exactly where the new schools are going to go, right? So where are we targeting these areas? What home builders are at a point where we really want to plant a neighborhood elementary school in there, working with them on land acquisition and things like that. And then I oversee any of the new construction or additions and renovations through the bond. And so in my department, I have two teams of two, which is a construction manager and what we call a construction specialist. The construction specialist we have involved throughout the entire project, but their main role and responsibility is to take over the project at the end, finish out any of the punch list work, and then oversee that project for the next year while it's still under warranty, and then work with maintenance once things start to drop off of that first year warranty. But rooftop units, compressors, parts and pieces that are still 5-10 years under warranty, they work with them and facilities to kind of divide and conquer who's really responsible for that. So right now, that's each one of those guys, each one of those teams is overseeing anywhere from about 200 to 350 million in construction, which is really, as you know, Burke, has gotten skewed over the last couple of years. We used to try to designate, okay, we want this team to have about 150 or so million dollars. Well, coming out of the pandemic, when pricing just went nuts, that just skewed everything. So what was 150 is now 300, and it's the same amount of work, and so we're looking at it more on a square footage basis of what a high school or a couple middle schools versus 3 or 4 elementaries, and try to make sure that the amount of square footage that each team has is about the same, just so that one's not really overburdened, or we're not burning out one team while another one's standing around twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah. So you guys are doing all of these with CM at risk partners, or?
We do both. So we do CM at risk, and then we do CSP. So hard bid, basically. Typically what we'll do on a brand new design, that is something that we will do as a CMR, just because we don't know what we don't know yet on this. If it's a prototype, we really want the contractors more involved early on so that they can help us, so that when we are bidding a brand new design, we're not really caught off guard by the time it goes to bid. If it's a prototype, like our elementary schools, right now we're building the 7th rendition of these elementary schools. So we have a pretty good handle on, where those landmines are. And so those are all, the last 4 of those have been hard bid. And we'll probably build another 3 to 4 of this prototype elementary school before we change it and then go back to a CSP or a CMR, excuse me. So any of the really complicated, like we're doing almost a $200 million addition and renovation on our oldest high school, Northwest High School. And we're going to be adding on, tearing into the heart of that school, changing from a chiller plant to more rooftop units. And so that one, we went CMR just because, one, the contractor has had a lot of experience out there. They know it. But they're also able to work with that design team early enough in the drawings to get their subs out there along with the MEP engineers and get above the ceilings and just try to figure out what kind of a beast it is we're going to have to wrestle over the next 2 to 3 years to get this project done.
Right. So when you guys do these, like, I know our board authorized like an owner contingency that I could approve change orders out of,
Yep.
and that kind of thing, without having to go to them for
Yep.
every change order. Is that how you guys kind of run it as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. We do it absolutely the same way. And it's so thankful. And, that's one of the things coming from the YMCA, where it's a nonprofit and you basically had to go out and raise every bit of that money for those projects. Your contingency was gold. And, those projects, never had the budgets for what was needed. And so something always had to get sacrificed. One of the nice things about Tim and Sarah and the way they not only are designing these schools, but setting them up is they're setting us up for success. So on a project like the owner's contingency that we've had on the elementary schools, we've been able to knock that down a little bit every time because we know there are fewer and fewer unknowns on a building that we're building now 7 times. And so
Right.
that we've been able to squeeze that a little bit, but yet still make it manageable enough to where we're putting ourselves in a position where we're not going to be, coming in hot and just going, okay, board, here's $3 left. It's my goal is always to turn back a 6-figure number to the board. And sometimes it's been 20,000 because that's just what that project's needed, but being able to turn back in some money at the end of every project is always the goal. We don't have a bond manager in our district right now. And as long as we're able to maintain these buildings, get them built on time and turning money back over, I think that allows us to show the board that we know what we're doing and we don't really need anybody because we've got the capable people here to be able to manage it and do it.
Right. I always like to turn money in, but the main thing I don't want to do is have to ask for more.
Absolutely. And thankfully, knock on wood,
Right.
haven't had to do it since I've been here. And so, like I said, I think, our planning department really does a good job in setting us up for that success and works with us. They always say, hey, here's this project. What do you think, whether it's a percentage of the construction or if we have a pretty good idea of what we want that number to be, then we just say, plug in this number and we can get it done. We can be successful with that. So I'm always very thankful that I've got those that are making those decisions before it gets handed off to us, that's at least hearing us out and putting us in a position where we know we're going to be successful.
Yeah. So, how much do you guys involve like your facilities group, like the maintenance guys or their leader, as you go through design, for custodial areas or equipment selections, that kind of thing?
So custodial, not as much. It really depends on what's going in there. I think with the folks that we've got, that we have such a great knowledge and wealth of experience in K-12 design and construction in our department that what we will do is we always work with maintenance up front going, hey, we're probably just going to go with rooftop units on this one. Everybody's very comfortable with that. We can maintain them. We do have a few projects, some older schools that were geothermal. The interesting thing about down here, Burke, and it was such an eye opener for me coming from Kansas where, as long as you just got to get down below the frost and spread footings, and a lot of the foundations were very similar back up in Kansas, where here in this area, and I had a geotechnical engineer help explain this to me. Well, when the ice sheets came down to the Texas Gulf, they brought all this stuff down with them. When they receded, they just left it here. So the Texas area, really from the Gulf until you get to almost the Red River in Oklahoma, we can have massively different soil and foundation types within a few miles difference in any direction in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got all these fingers of just really unique soil conditions. And so some areas of the Dallas-Fort Worth area are perfect for geothermal because it's very stable. Where we are in North Fort Worth is what's called the Barnett Shale. So a few years ago, when fracking was very popular, we also had earthquakes in this area because you're pumping a lot of water and some fluid down there and sucking it all back up. Well, that left some voids in the soil, which because it's some crazy soils down here, just created some pockets, the earth shift, and so geothermal does not work really great in an area where you've got movement. And so we've got a lot of those well fields that are not in convenient spots. They're under parking lots. And so just finding and isolating where those leaks are in the fields has been difficult. So most of what we'll do is rooftop units. So we'll sit down with our maintenance folks and say, what is it that we're using, whether it's a manufacturer or certain systems, and then we'll turn that over to the design team and let them go through that. And then we bring them through in the DD phase, the construction document phase, just to make sure that access is there, that we're not putting hard ceilings in area where we're going to have to punch a bunch of access panels in, because, you know, we don't want to turn the architect's ideas into Swiss cheese in construction, you know. And so that's one of the things I think we also do a really good job of, is having my background, being able to sit in on these design meetings early enough, going, okay, what's our roof going to look like? Are we going to have really deep mechanical wells? You know, we're going to have to change out some compressors. These compressors are several £100. So if the goal is just to screen some mechanical units, we can have a small drop down, like a 2-foot drop down of a mechanical well with a 3 or 4 foot tall parapet, screens the mechanical units, makes it easy to maintain, as opposed to some of these 8 to 10 foot sunk deep mechanical wells that now, okay, you've turned a 2-person job into a 4 and 5 person job. And so that's that input I'm able to take back while things are still in design development and on paper, when it's easy to fix, as opposed to seeing it out on the job site and going, wow, we could have probably done this better.
Right. Yeah. So, kind of a tangent subject. How did you were probably on the periphery, but that big cold snap,
Oh yeah,
what year were you
a couple of
guys?
years ago. Yep.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Snowmageddon. So you know what's driven, that's a great point. So I'd say out of the 35 buildings that we have in our district, 30 of them had water damage. 90% of those were due to the hose bibs that were in the exterior walls.
Ah,
So what we have done is we have now made a district-wide decision that we're no longer going to have an exterior wall hose bib. We're going to put those in the ground, basically in the same location as to where they would be, just not in the wall. It's going to be in a valve box in the ground, so that the next time that's going to happen, because it's, you know, it was truly a unique thing, but let's be honest, the world's changing, and so it's, you know, whether it's this winter or 5 winters from now, we want to make sure that we're making good decisions now, which, you know, when whoever comes behind us, they go, man, that was a really good decision that these folks made, as opposed to, I'm not really sure what they were thinking, you know.
yeah, you think Dallas Fort Worth is very temperate, but it has more swing than you think.
It does, and we get a lot more ice down
Hmm.
here, because we'll get more ice down here than snow. The thing that really caught everybody off guard a couple years ago was that we were below freezing for about 72 hours. That is extremely unique for us down here. We'll get down below freezing, but it's usually for a few hours, a day at the most. And then it's usually 40, 50 plus degrees the next day. So even when we get some snow, it's here for maybe a day or two at the most, and then it melts off, you know, at least on the pavement. So that was just a really unique time for us, because it just dropped below freezing for so long that most of the buildings down here just were not designed for that. And so
Right.
and it wasn't just the commercial, it was probably more residential homes got hit harder than most of the commercial ones. But it was sort of a perfect storm in that, you know, the grid was exposed down here. Texas is on its own power grid. And a lot of the natural gas, which most of what the heat is down here, is pumped through electrical pumps. And so when the electrical power plants went down, then the gas plants went down, because they weren't able to push the gas. And so it was really kind of a perfect storm, which hopefully our state politicians are in the process of fixing.
Well, that storm cost us a lot of money too in gas. So as executive director, I mean, I see a lot of pictures you post walking around in a hard hat, but like, what's your day look like normally?
Man, so I'm very blessed with a great team. And like I said, the construction managers, the construction specialists that we have are the ones that handle the day to day. My there at this point we've got 7 active projects under construction. We have 4 elementary schools, we have 2 middle schools, and then the large addition and renovation to Northwest High School. So we've got 7 under construction right now, of which we've probably got an OAC meeting, owner architect contractor meeting, every morning and afternoon, Monday through Thursday, to cover all those. So I will sit in on all those, get updated, give input where I feel it, is needed, give direction where needed, and then really let my team handle the day-to-day of just making sure they're staying on schedule, things are being supplied when they need to, and we're hitting all the milestone dates that we need to, because we also have to work with planning, who brings in all the furniture. So even though, we're going to say, yeah, we're going to get that school open by, mid-August. Well, admin comes back right after the 4th of July break. So we've got to have admin areas ready, mid-July. Furniture is going to start showing up even before then, because admin folks got to have a place to work. And so even though the construction date may be mid-August, you start backing that up 2 and 3 months sometimes, and it's really June or right after school gets out when some of these buildings need to be ready, just so that we can punch them out, make sure the HVAC unit's been tested and balanced. And even after all that, Burke, as you know, we'll probably spend the better part of the next year working on these buildings, just making sure that we've got everything picked up and it's working as designed, and we're making sure we're getting what we're paid for, or what we paid for. And so I'm very lucky in that I have those guys, those boots on the ground that really handle the day to day. And so I'm just being kept up to speed with everything, so that when I present to the board in our monthly presentation, that I can get up there and I can show them some really cool pictures of the progress, and I can reassure them that these projects are on schedule and under budget. And those are the 2 things that I always end my presentations with. And so by being kept up to date and making sure that I'm out there, and making sure that I'm seeing with my own eyes what my guys are telling me, that if I've got any questions, all I got to do is pick up the phone and they can answer it for me. But I just want to make sure that I'm not just sitting in my office all day, because sometimes there's going to be that one time a board member is going to ask me a question, and I'll be like, man, if I was just out at a job site, I'd probably know that. So I also want to make sure that I'm putting my eyes on every project every week, just so that I can make sure that I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing and what I'm being told.
You hit on something that was a lesson learned for me. I've opened 3 new elementary schools in my 3 years. And the first one we opened July of 2020. So just after just after the close down. And we got the certificate of occupancy like July 20th. And here we can't put any furniture in the building until you have a certificate of occupancy.
Mm,
And so they had basically like 4 weeks to install furniture, get the school. I mean, the administration staff worked nonstop, and so did a lot of the teachers, just to get everything ready.
yeah.
A month isn't enough. I mean, so the next 2, we gave a lot more time, and we understood how that looks to open a new building.
Yep.
I mean, all the IT infrastructure, all that stuff still had to go in, and it was a challenge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to give yourself enough time. So just because the construction says it's going to be done in July, that probably isn't enough time to get the school open.
It's not, we're opening out of the 7 that we have under construction. We open 5 for school next fall.
Yeah.
So all 4 elementaries and one of the middle schools will open next fall. And even before I got here, they never opened more than 2 schools at the beginning of a year. So this is going to be very unique for us to make sure that we can accomplish this. So there's a heightened level of anxiety that's starting to build right now. One of the things that, again, my boss, not just because he's an architect, he's just a really sharp guy. They bought a warehouse a couple months ago, because typically, as you know, when you're trying to get some of this furniture in the school, well, it's not always built, right? So they've got to have space to kind of put it together. Well, where's that? That's either cafeteria or a gym, right? And so in an elementary school, those are, they're not huge spaces. They're big enough, but those are also the areas that the contractor's using to store remaining items and stuff like that. And so when we started, realizing we were going to be opening 5 schools this fall, we're like, there's no place we have, and we don't want to hope, because hope's not a strategy, that we've got space in these schools to be able to put all this stuff together. And so he's like, let's look at getting a warehouse where we can have it all delivered, have it assembled, and then we can ship it out as needed. And that's absolutely going to be a lifesaver for us. Not so much in the middle school. That thing's going to get done in May, and so we've got plenty of time to get it open. We'll have big, their cafeteria is huge. So we can, stage some of that furniture there if need be. But the elementary schools, 2 of them are replacements. And so we can't do anything with the existing ones until the new ones are done, even though they have new furniture. So that helps. So we, that new furniture that's in the old schools, we're just going to move over. But the 2 new ones, I don't want to rely on those being ready. So having that warehouse is just, it's like a relief valve for us, knowing that we're not going to have that additional pressure of trying to get a space done. That's, we're going to have to come back in and polish up at the last minute because there's furniture all over it until that last minute. So that's really huge for us, having that warehouse.
Well, with the lead times of some of the furniture,
Absolutely.
that warehouse will be just a lifesaver because you can
Yep.
order it super early and
Yep.
get it all ready and staged there. Yeah,
Yep.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, hey, anything else you want to touch on that might be unique to what you guys are doing?
I will say just in general. So, I think we've all, lead times have been such a huge issue. And then, of course, the pricing of construction has just been astronomical. What we're seeing and what we're being told is some of that stuff is starting to, they don't want to say normalize, because normalize, I think a lot of people think, oh, things are, the price is going to come down. I think we're all realistic enough to know that pricing's not going to go back down to what it was, but I think it's stabilizing, right? It's not like 30% higher than what it was. And the lead times are starting to come down a little bit as well. So what was, some of our elementary schools are only a 12-month project, but when you've got roofing materials that are 14 months out, that math just doesn't work, and so some things like that are starting to, at least in this area of the country, are starting to stabilize a little bit more. So that's helping us relieve some anxiety, but we are still putting in healthy contingencies and just additional funds, because we know that, if we pass this bond in May, that's probably going to be a 4 or 5 year period. Well, whatever projects on the back end of that, whatever we're pricing it today, it's going to be obviously more just an escalation. And so we're really working with our contractor partners to make sure we've got a good pulse on that and what's a realistic dollar amount to help fight that escalation, so that we're again putting ourselves in a position to succeed. So we're starting to get a little bit of better feel of that, where when we were coming out of the pandemic, it was like shooting darts in the dark, man. You just
Yeah.
were hoping you were close, and you were rarely where you hoped to be. So
Yeah,
seems
I'm
like
very
that's helping.
on our bond issue. We signed the last GMP basically during the pandemic. So we ended up still on the low end of inflation, and all the timelines were still being hit. But
Yeah.
yeah, you guys today, I can't imagine.
Yeah, with as much as we've got going on, that's a huge item for us, that we have to make sure we have ourselves covered, just so that we're not coming up short. This last bond we did, because I don't think anybody was expecting 20-30% escalation on pricing. The elementary schools that we built before the pandemic, were over $10 million more coming out of the pandemic, less than a year and a half later.
Oh my.
That is just really hard to absorb. So there were a few projects in this last bond that we just weren't able to get done. And luckily, the way we have things set up, we have a list of projects, but we just say, this is the bond, this dollar number is the bond. And it's not really necessarily tied to specific projects. We're going to pass X number of dollars, which will hopefully allow us to build this much work. And so, because it was worldwide, I think everybody understood, but we're trying to, in this next bond, put ourselves in a better position to where we've got a more successful chance of completing all the projects that we're hopefully going to get the support from our community.
Yeah, that's really smart because next time people won't be as forgiving.
Absolutely.
Say, hey, I wrap up every episode with what I call rapid fire. So I got 3 questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, if your parents had to tell their friends what you do for a living, what would they say?
I'd say probably just say I build schools.
That's good. Are you a digital planner guy or a paper planner guy?
That's a great question. I really like to do both. I like to put it down on paper first, and then get it in a digital format so that I always have access to it. But I think just that architecture background, I try to stay a little loose, make sure I got some options before I put anything hardlined into the computer.
Yep. When do you get your best work done during the day? Like what?
Either early in the morning when nobody's in the office, or late in the afternoon when nobody's here. If I'm in the office, I've got people coming in and out all the time, right? Like the construction guys will come in, or even maintenance guys going, hey, this material's really not holding up well, so I'll write myself a note, send it over to the planning, or the phone's ringing, or I'm just trying to get caught up on email. So I try to block out Friday as my one day where I don't have any regular meetings, just so that I know by the end of the week, I can at least get caught up and I don't have a bunch of email that I haven't even looked at or been able to address going into the weekend, haunting me on Monday morning. And so that's the one day I try to just keep open so that I can get caught up and not feel like I'm sinking at the end of the week. So early in the morning and late in the day when nobody's around, that's when I get the bulk of that done.
Yep. Well, sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much for taking your time, and you guys got a fascinating, I guess, situation down there with all that growth and trying to keep up with it. So, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Burke. And anytime you're down this area, I'd love to give you a tour of what we're doing down here. And next time I'm up there visiting family, I'll hit you up because I'd love to see what y'all are doing in Derby.
Sounds good. Well, we have an indoor practice facility now.
Nice.
It's not really, actually, I think the football team uses it less than anybody. Um, and it really, everybody that said, because it's basically a half-size football field that's
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, it's for the football team. Honestly, it's used by PE all day long. It's used by marching band. It's used by ROTC and community.
Yeah.
And football coaches like, look, we play outside. We're going to practice outside.
I know. Same down here. Same down
But
here.
it's a great facility.
It
But
is.
yeah,
It's a great asset to have.
well, thanks again. I really appreciate it, and have a good week.
Thanks. You as well, Burke. Merry Christmas.
You too.